66 million years ago, a mountain from space was already on its way. And its size rivaled two New York cities side by side. And now gravity pulled it into the atmosphere. In seconds, the sky was split by fire. Then the world was hit. On Earth, the first warning was light. A Triceratops herd looked up, but could not understand. Even the water reacted before the animals moved. Above them, a line of fire cut through the sky. The ground began to fail beneath the giants. The impact did not stay in one place. It spread through the planet. Rock, dust, and vapor were thrown back toward the sky. Moments later, the atmosphere itself became a weapon. Far from the crater, the water carried the impact. Armor could not stop the planet from shaking. For smaller dinosaurs, speed became the first defense. Protection became the only certainty left. This was no ordinary storm. It was the sky striking back. Soon, the sky began to rain fire back onto Earth. The forest was still standing, but the world above it had already broken. 1 hour after impact, fire began falling from the sky. The floodplains became escape routes, but nowhere was safe. Even the rulers of the sky were forced down to Earth. The ground itself began to tear open. The largest bodies moved slowly through a world changing too fast. On the coast, the sea rose like a moving mountain. Even the greatest predator now walked on broken ground. Herds ran because instinct demanded movement. This was no longer a local disaster. It was becoming the planet. Day one after impact, daylight began to fail. Food still existed, but it was already disappearing. The hunters survived the blast, but their world had changed. Some herds stopped, trapped between water, fire, and ash. The skies that once carried life had become dangerous. Every step now tested the broken earth. By the third day, hunger replaced panic. The coast had changed from refuge into wasteland. Predators still watched, but the old rules were failing. The disaster was no longer an event. It had become the environment.
Day 7 after impact, the forests had become corridors of fire.
Volcanic fire added its voice to the wounded planet. Storms crossed the continents under a poisoned sky. Sea carried the impact far beyond the crater. For the giants, even water became a trap. Panic spread from herd to herd across the dying land. By the second week, exhaustion reached even the strongest bodies. The skies grew silent as the flying reptiles vanished from the coast. The planet was becoming almost unrecognizable. Above the planet, dust began to wrap the world in darkness. Day 30 after impact, fires still burned through the ancient forests. The sun was still there, but the world could barely feel it.
Temperatures fell as the sky blocked the light.
Food was vanishing, and families weakened together. The sky lost many of its largest wings. The greatest herbivores could not survive without plants. Hunters could still roar, but prey was disappearing. By 90 days, life had retreated into silence. From space, the planet carried the scar of an ending. By day 7, fire had become the shape of the world. The herds kept walking, but the land no longer fed them. Water remained, but even water had changed. Even the strongest predator was now only a survivor. Armor could not stop the sky, but it could still protect a child. Some took to the air, searching for a world that was gone. The oceans carried the disaster back to land. Death covered the ground, but life waited beneath it. The old world did not vanish in one moment. It faded animal by animal.
By the second week, silence had become part of the landscape.
The sky kept returning pieces of the impact to Earth. The young followed, even when there was nowhere safe left to go. Every pool became a gamble. Along the coasts, the sea came back as a wall. The ground itself had become unstable. The largest animals needed the most food, and food was disappearing.
Smaller bodies needed less, and that became an advantage.
The king still roared, but the world no longer answered. And by day 30, the ash had begun to fall like winter. The disaster was no longer an event. It was the climate. 2 months later, every meal had to be searched for. Survival now meant moving before the ground failed. Some still searched the old feeding grounds. The coastlines were redrawn by waves and ash. Heat still rose from a planet trying to close its wounds. For giants, every day became heavier than the last. The cold came slowly, but it reached everywhere. A predator could survive hunger, but not an empty world forever. The sky was darker, and the ground grew colder. By the 4th month, emptiness had spread across entire valleys. Migration became survival, even when the destination was unknown. Family remained, even as the world thinned around them. The rivers still moved, but their banks had become graveyards. Above the coast, wings searched for anything left alive. The impact winter had begun. The bones told what the silence could not. Smallness had become a form of power. Whole forests remained standing, but they were no longer alive. But beneath the ash, life had not surrendered. The planet was wounded, but it was not dead. The survivors moved through a world stripped almost bare. The strength of the great herds was fading. The last giants followed the coast, searching for green. Even the flyers had to return to poisoned ground. The armored survivors moved through heat, ash, and hunger. Small survivors learned to read every silence. For a time, the old kings still walked. The world had become colder than their bodies were built for. The age of giants was becoming a layer in the ground. One year later, the light began to return. The earth was still burning in places. Some families survived longer than the world expected. Survival had become slower, weaker, and more uncertain. The sea still offered food, but only in fragments. The impact winter tested every body that remained.
Most of the giants were now part of the ash. In the shadow of the giants, smaller lives endured. Rain began to carve through the ashes. 2 years later, green returned in small, fragile places. The age of dinosaurs was ending, but Earth was already preparing another world.